इयं विसृष्टिर्यत आबभूव यदि वा दधे यदि वा न यो अस्याध्यक्षः परमे व्योमन्सो अङ्गं वेद यदि वा न वेद.
Welcome to Civilizational Bridge, where we delve into the diverse cultural and historical connections between India and the world. I am Hemant Kundeti, and today we are honored to host an eminent personality, Professor Gautam Desiraju. Born in Madras and educated in Bombay and the United States, Professor Desiraju is a celebrated structural chemist and educationist known for his groundbreaking work in crystal engineering and weak hydrogen bonding. Professor Emeritus at the Indian Institute of Science, Professor for 30 years in the University of Hyderabad, a profound thinker whose views on science, education, and Indian culture have sparked meaningful dialogues. Today, we dive into his book, Bharat India 2.0, a thought-provoking read that explores redefining India's role as a civilizational state in the modern world by reverting back to the concept of dharma, a uniquely Indian view on the path of righteousness. Welcome, Mr. Gautam Desiraju, to the show.
Namaste to all viewers. Thank you, Hemant, for having invited me kindly to speak with you in your channel. And I'm glad that you feel that my book is thought provoking.
Absolutely. It was wonderfully thought provoking. I enjoyed every bit of it. You know, I'm just interested in your, early influences in your life. For example, what steered you towards a career in chemistry and later into the education and social commentary?
This first part is easy. I don't think I liked any subject in school as much as I liked chemistry. And it was a kind of a natural attraction to this subject, and which is also in those days growing up in India kind of unusual because students used to like maths and physics on the one hand, or they would like biology on the other hand. I mean, those who are interested in science subjects. So possibly chemistry was sort of like a stepchild in this whole panorama of science subjects, and but somehow I always felt there's something fun about this subject. Like now, right now in Deepavali, all the crackers, sounds, lights, noises which you see in a chemistry lab, you don't see in a physics lab or a biology lab. So I guess
It's
anybody
true.
who likes some unusual things, different kind of stuff, will probably like chemistry. I wouldn't know, but certainly I consider myself as one of those lucky people who was able to pursue a career in this subject, which is perhaps I might have been quite useless doing any working in any other subject other than chemistry. So many people today I find they're not so lucky. They like something, but they're forced to work or do something in some other area. Of course, they get used to it. I've never had to face those problems. I always work.
Example is
Huh?
example is right in front of you. My background is in chemical engineering.
Okay.
Yeah, and I worked in a chemistry lab myself. So I couldn't pursue that. I'm in the IT realm right now as a project manager.
Fair enough. Fair enough. My son is also a chemical engineer by training, and he also works in IT in India. So I guess people do change, but I have never had the reason to change. And introduction to other subjects, I mean, it came in very gradually. And I would
Gotcha.
say that for the clean first 50 years of my life, that is right up to the period about 2000, uh, I was pretty much driven with my academic work and family life. And so I wasn't, apart from a very passing interest in certain political developments. One of the things that people have asked me this, I think the great political uncertainty in India in the 1990s might have been the first time when I started thinking about these matters, because I was wondering, why are we going through so much of uncertainty? Ministries used to be toppled and created, again and again and again, both at the center and at the state level. And in those days, I was living in the then undivided state of Andhra Pradesh. So then we had a new political party, and in the form of the TDP, and then the old party, the Congress. So what drives the people to like this party or that party? Why are they fighting so bitterly? And one would have felt that all political parties should be interested in bettering the life of the common people. One thing I was very clear, even in the 1990s, was that I was living in an abysmally poor country. And so, when there's so much poverty all around, what are these politicians doing fighting with each other so much? So, I guess gradually this got me interested into this, but it was not any one particular moment when this was triggered off. I think people have asked me about the book also, why I wrote the book, and that was a single incident because the COVID pandemic, we had the lockdown, and suddenly one fine morning I couldn't go back to my lab and talk to my postdocs. So, just located at home, it's impossible for an experimental scientist uh, to work at all. So, question
Yeah.
is either sitting at home and watching TV, or we, like many others in India, had a strong internet connection in the house. So I started reading about all things the Constitution of India. And I must say, I've always had an interest in history. Although not particularly in Indian history, I was always interested in world history. The history of Europe, I think, has very, very fond of that subject. And so I've always been, I like history as a subject. So this
It
also
shows in
got,
your book.
huh?
It
It
shows
does.
in your book. You had wide variety of examples from various world history points in world history. So
Okay,
that
one
was
thing I can tell you, Hemant, at that time, after 2010 especially, I started thinking more about the fact that we were in the sorry position that we were because of the colonial period of the British. And I started thinking about the English people in a very different way after 2010. I have dealt with them very closely in my academic life, and I have had many very pleasant interactions with chemists from all over Great Britain over many years. Visited there also very often. I started a major journal from the Royal Society of Chemistry, which was a British publishing house. So it's not that, but I started thinking about Britain as our colonial master at that time. And I
Mhm.
started reading more about the kind of utter poverty that they drove this country into. And I must say, the one thing that has changed for me after 2010 is my whole attitude to Britain as as a colonial power, and then generally about Europe itself, because the economy of the world was based on colonization in the 19th century. It's
Exactly.
not just Britain, but also France, to a lesser extent, I would say Germany, certainly Belgium. The fact that it was an economic model, you know,
Yeah.
and so the colonies were just a kind of a means of production. So before
Exactly.
the Marxism and communism thing started, this was the ruling economic paradigm. So I was able to look more lucidly into this whole thing, and then, of course, the sad and sorry story of what happened to the Congress party after independence. Then the political uncertainty of the thing, the 1990s were a period of basically when the full Congress party started disintegrating and unraveling. The process started in the 90s, if you ask me. So, and so what exactly this party had done to our country,
Yeah.
because till then, I was growing up, and the time when I was growing up, or even a young man, there was only one political party in the country. There was the Congress. It was the default. It's the only party. Using a computer language, Congress is the operating system of the whole Indian laptop.
Yeah.
So, yeah, operating. So we all thought like that. Even the opposition parties used to think like Congress people. The way they to take Vajpayee's era and all that.
Yeah.
The BJP person thinking in the Congress fashion. So there was no new way of thinking, and of course, Ram Janambhoomi is something that
Yeah.
when it happened, I wasn't very sure what it meant. And you are of Indian origin, so you know that, and you come from the south like I do. So you know that for all of us in the south, Ayodhya was a very far away place.
Yeah.
Not that we don't regard Lord Ramchandra as, you know, Purushottam
Yeah.
and that kind. It's not that, but Ayodhya, something, a mosque being broken down and a temple. This was still, I think, in the early 90s, a bit far away from at least my perspective and kinds of things I used to think about. But then you slowly started realizing that the danger that the so-called, and then the word pseudo-secular started appearing
Yeah.
with people like Mulayam Singh Yadav and all these chaps. So I think it was a long answer to your simple question. So gradually the damage that the single party had wreaked on this country, because we getting independence itself was a huge event. I think nobody believed that we would ever be independent also.
Yeah.
And so getting independence, huge event, and given this chance, whatever it is, I don't know. I mean, after so many years,
Let me
I,
let
I
me
used to be
quote.
very, very, very hostile towards what the Congress party had done. Today, I'm at this stage, I'm not very sure. Maybe they did the only thing that they could have done in those times. But
Let me
today,
let
what
me
they're going to do, of course, is not a. There's no question about it. And so I don't know. I mean, the problems faced by India in say 1950 were so huge.
let me quote an excerpt from your book. It actually leads up to this. I was looking for it. After nearly a century, one should only consider the actions of these larger than life personalities with a certain consideration. Their times were momentous. Ordinary men and women were doing extraordinary things. It was not clear how British, skilled in statecraft and politics of the most subtle and devious varieties, would react in any particular circumstance. Above all, Purna Swaraj, or independence, was the undoubted aim of all these towering personalities. Today, one need neither look upon Gandhi and Ambedkar as gods, nor regard the constitution that they and others inspired and drafted as a holy book. It was what any group of well read and intelligent men and women, mostly lawyers, thought was best for India at that time. This kind of aptly summarizes what you were saying. It's an amazing thought process because what they were thinking at that time, uh, and for a period of time, even if you take after 1950s, socialism, was a big thing. It kind of energized uh, large numbers of people. Crowds were all energized about socialism, and that was the period, that was the time. Every party, BJP started with a socialistic identity. Jana, what is the party's name?
Janasangh. Janasangh.
Janasangh. You had Janasangh, and then you had all these parties. Even Congress party, they wanted to include secular socialist, right? You wrote in your book as well. They wanted to include it in the constitution. So can we really see them with a lens of, is were they doing were they trying to do their best, or were they actually trying to destroy the country? You can have two points of view, but what happened has happened, unfortunately.
You let me break your comments into two or three sections. First, starting with the quotation from my book, which you have kindly read out. One thing is clear about all our pre independence leaders, all of them, I would say, including even, except barring extreme people to the left who wanted violence, except
Yeah.
that group, I think everybody else loved their country deeply. I think that is, you cannot debate that.
No.
Whether it is Gandhi, Ambedkar, Patel, Nehru, Shama Prasad Mukherjee, anybody, all loved the
Anybody.
country. Second thing I will say is without fear of contradiction, that nobody in that group was money minded in any way. In fact, money, I believe, was one of the last things on their
Yeah.
minds. While they realized that money is important for certain things to run certain political enterprises, but the political parties themselves were simple creatures in those days. They were not very complicated things. And before independence, the Congress was more a national movement. It was not a political party.
Hmm.
And which is why Gandhi wanted the Congress to be disbanded at independence, because he said it has fulfilled its role and it can, the issue of governance can be more properly taken up by new political parties that are now in an independent India. So what the Congress set out to do, he said it had done.
Yeah.
Now, of course, human beings being human beings, I think the leaders of the Congress realized that tremendous amount of electoral heft they will get simply by using the word Congress. So they did do that. And coming to socialism itself, I will say that look, we were desperately poor.
Exactly.
The lifespan of an average Indian male was 27, and that of a female was 22, I think. Education was practically zero, communications zero, basic facilities, health conditions zero, foreign affairs zero. The country had
Yeah.
been undergone a traumatic partition, and we don't know what is going to happen next. And if you look at events in modern day Pakistan today, you will realize that it was at the crosshairs of Anglo American diplomacy, which is why it was even created
Yeah.
to make a small enclave for them. And there's a recent body of thought today which says that the Anglo American enclave decided that undivided India, was going to be too big for them to control. So it is easier and better for them to create a small place without any geographical connection. It's a country which is all length and no width, Pakistan, which is the least defendable kind of a country at all, if you look at geopolitics. Thin,
Yeah.
long countries are very hard to defend
Yeah.
because it is full of, and today Pakistan has got hostile neighbors on all sides. So it wasn't created with any interest of the people who went and lived there, but it was more created to keep Anglo American interests going in this part of the world with the expanding Soviet Union. So, if we had not gone for socialism, Hemant, I feel we could very easily have gone into some kind of a Pakistan model. And one of the first things, good things that was done by Nehru was to end the zamindari system.
That was
Because
right.
today it is the zamindari system that has been the noose around Pakistan's neck.
Absolutely.
And there is no excuse. I think all the leaders, I think in the book I quote, there was a man, I think, what was his name? Srinivas Iyengar, was it? Who wrote a constitution in 1928,
Hmm.
who is the political mentor of K. Kamaraj. And he has actually said that removing untouchability is more important than even getting independence. He said we don't even need independence, but we have to remove untouchability first.
Yeah.
So when the social disparities were so high, I think this business of equity taking a front seat was probably only fair and important.
But
The
but
fact
but
that
I,
it,
I
the
do.
fact that it has not gotten us exactly where it is supposed to have gotten us
Yeah.
is quite another matter. But suppose I'm asking hypothetically, I'm saying suppose we had done nothing and continued with the kind of a economic model favored by say Rajaji Patel and others. Still, I think the jury is out as far as my mind is concerned whether we would have been better off or worse off today. So probably, see, otherwise the social tensions would have mounted to as it is they were mounting.
They were
I think
mounting.
Indira
Yeah.
Gandhi was not able to control all these things for the major part of her prime ministership. She couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And then the breakup and the starting of this Karpuri Thakur ministry in UP, followed by JP, and then the whole OBC movement, Mandal, from the Tamil Nadu side, all this DMK, ADMK business. See, the question of social churning, social unrest, what we call in Hindi as manthan. So,
Hmm.
this churning of the various social divisions is not stopped as yet. I think it is less than what it was 20, 30 years ago. But I think that we probably couldn't have avoided the socialistic phase. Where I would say is that probably it was lasting too long. It would have easily vanished from this country 10, 15 years ago, and we would have been better off. Like today,
No,
take the present, this caste-based census and all that. They are trying to push us back 50 years again
yeah,
in the name of electoral, quick electoral gains.
quick
So these
electoral.
things I hope should not be allowed. I don't know. Maybe you don't agree with me fully, but you know,
I I completely agree with you. See, this is the same way Hindus and Muslims were divided. You know, before in 1909, you mentioned Minto Marley reforms, which basically divided the country, and the Muslims had their own electorates, where only Muslims can participate in those elections, vote for them. So, if you divide the country and take this caste census, what will happen is, they will say these many OBCs are there, these many BCs are there, these many OCs, forward castes are there. And are you trying to, how are you directing your funds? Is it, see, anytime you do a division of a country based on a race, based on caste, anything, other than what is based on economics, right? You can take census based on what is your income level. One of the videos I've argued that the difference between Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Sudras, all these different castes is that Brahmins are just learned. It doesn't mean that other people who are learned cannot get into the get to be Brahmins. Kshatriyas are warriors. Sudras are in the service caste, and of course Vaisyas are the businessmen. You need, even today you have that. If it is based on economics, meaning the caste is almost an artificial construct now, because it has continued based on the birth, while economics themselves, the income levels of the people, are not some artificial constructs. They are real. They are there in front of us. So maybe income levels are the way to go, rather than these artificial constructs that we have in our society.
certainly.
Something to think about.
I mean, going a little ahead from what you have said, I think I do mention this in the book. Every stable society in the world has stratification, and these strata are defined using different criteria, which in the modern world have less and less to do with birth, although birth cannot be completely ruled out, because the son of a rich man is more often than not likely to be rich. So you can't, everything doesn't get reset with each new birth. So if you take in today's criteria, I will say that yes, we have Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras in this country. But a Brahmin is anybody who is a vision leader,
Yep.
who has got a vision, who has got a picture that he is willing to explain to other people. That is a Brahmin for me. Is anybody who has and wields authority. It can be
Militant.
bureaucratic authority, it can be political authority, any kind of authority over other people in some sort of an administrative capacity or executive capacity or a military capacity.
Yep.
So I would say that all these people who have any sort of authority to my mind, are Kshatriyas. Now, the Vaishyas, to my mind, are the creators of wealth. So they, through their innovativeness, maybe by listening to the Brahmins and taking the help of the Kshatriyas, are able to generate systems and enterprises that start generating money for society at large. I was just talking about Pakistan because I'm reading a lot about Pakistan these days. What Pakistan today is missing, if you ask me, is the absence of an organized Vaishya community. That
True.
country has lost the ability to create and generate wealth within itself. So
True.
once a society has lost the Vaishya community, it has basically lost everything, because without Artha there cannot be Dharma. It's
True.
impossible. So
True.
finally then it comes to the question is, who is the modern day Shudra? The modern day Shudra, in my way of looking at it, is any salaried employee.
Sure.
And for doing a certain amount of work that has been set out and agreed to by all the parties, he is able to put in that required amount of work and given the required amount of leave. At the end of the month, he or she draws a salary. That is a Shudra. So one should not, there is nothing derogatory
Huh.
about any of these forecasts. And to all the people who try to give various twisted and convoluted explanations for caste, no caste, Varna, Jati, British, Portuguese, it's a foreign word, and then I will accept anything, but it should not be by birth. No, sometimes a person who is good at making money, his son or daughter maybe have inherited that trait of making money well. So some of the caste traits might well be inherited at birth. You simply cannot say in a woke fashion that I will put end of file after each generation and say each new lot can start all over again. There is no need. In fact, science itself tells you that most things don't have to be started ab initio. So there must be a healthy balance between birth and native intelligence and resourcefulness, which is something that can be God given, can be acquired. I mean, that is the beauty of life, that start everybody, all the brothers and sisters in a family start seemingly at the same level, and life reveals different things for them and they all develop in different ways. So if we look at stratification, yes, every society did. Suppose all of us are exactly the same in all ways. That's what wokes are trying to do, no? They are saying men are equal to women, are equal to nothing. So in the process of equalizing, in the name of democracy, and as can be said, this so-called definition of this word democracy itself has caused a great deal of trouble, if not to any other countries, to my own country. It has caused a great deal of problems in our failure to understand what is meant by this word democracy, and our funny interpretations given to this word democracy by our constitution. I think it has caused us a lot of trouble. Sometimes, according to that definition, we need less democracy in this country today, because our constitution talks all about rights and nothing about duties,
True.
whereas our principal religion says that duties and rights are two different sides of the same coin, that you can't enjoy rights without putting in a certain amount of duties. Almost a communist kind of an idea, because don't forget that the constitution of the USSR spoke more about duties than about rights. So these are big questions that human beings have wrestled with through all times. Nothing new and nothing particular about India. But I think, yes, we need to look at all this a little more seriously and don't go in for jingoistic things said by politicians. And yes, this caste census is very mischievous, because then you will go to separate electorates. It's only a matter of time before you say that Yadavs can only vote for Yadavs in a Yadav constituency. then what is the purpose of the parliament? Then, in that person who is elected like that, will he only talk about Yadav related issues in the parliament? Then you might as well have your country only for Yadavs.
Yeah.
And in that respect, I will say one of the greatest contributions that Gandhi did was a very not very well known thing, and that is that 1931 Pune Pact with Ambedkar.
With Ambedkar, yeah.
Because Ambedkar wanted, the what is called
State electors for
preference for the scheduled caste.
scheduled
And Gandhi
castes.
said no. In fact, Ambedkar, just before independence, even wanted separate territories for the scheduled castes to go and live. Luckily, that this was not given. And so they opted for a via media where they said that the candidates can be subject to reservations for the scheduled caste constituencies, but everybody is allowed to vote over there, which is actually a pretty decent compromise.
Decent
And I think
compromise,
if
yeah.
you ask me about Gandhi and his political contributions, I think that was the one big contribution which he made. Because if that Pune Pact had not been written the way it was written, I think our country would have got into great deal of problems much quicker. Now we are actually getting into it with this caste reservations, but let us see. The election next year will tell the final result about that matter. Because if the BJP comes to power with a simple majority, as what many people are saying, then of course all this will be dead and buried. It will not come up again. But it's and also talking about caste reservation again is a sign of our general economic backwardness.
Hmm.
Because suddenly to feel that I have to study and only if I study I'll make money, and therefore and then it goes into even extremes. In the case of Tamil Nadu, it says Brahmins should not be allowed to study. So it has gone that far over there. So whereas others are saying we want to study in Tamil Nadu, they're saying Brahmins we will not let them study. So these are all very divisive things, and which I think that my book does highlight some of these things. Probably more should be written by others on these topics, because this is what thinking Indians, thinking Bharatiyas, I would like to call them today, should start worrying about a bit more.
Gotcha. I want to go into a slightly territory that we talked about with respect to Congress. I feel like this attitude of Congress, what has probably, it's summed up what has happened to Congress over the years. Your excerpts, one of the excerpt in your book says the civilizational tensions between first 12-year-long stint as president of India. It is alleged that when he died a few months after laying down office, Nehru as Prime Minister advised his successor Radhakrishnan to desist from attending his funeral. Radhakrishnan, continuing Prasad's tradition of exercising his presidential authority to as full an extent as the constitution would allow, disregarded Nehru's advice and went. Did they not do the same thing with P.V. Narasimha Rao?